Hello, good people, and welcome to Finance Skills Hub. Here we learn, we connect, and we grow. In the data analysis process, we take raw data, analyze, and then most likely we end up with a dashboard. Sometimes beyond the dashboard, it is important you draw your user's attention to the key things that you want him to take action on or consume. So in this case study, we are going to take Ghana's population and housing census data, the part that talked about religion and region and the various population in each sector, and draw your attention to the key things that we want you to consume. This is a way to tell a story from the data set. So this is also a capstone for our university project, and we want to also challenge you to be able to build the same dashboard or better. So join me in Excel and let's go through this shortly.
So here is our raw data set. On this side, we have the various religious affiliations in Ghana, and we have in this side in column B the aggregation, based on the number in each region and a percentage calculation here. Then from D onwards, we have the population breakdown for each region. Of course, if you look at this way, there's not a lot of insights in this black and white data. So I want to show you the end product. So if you switch here, you realize that I have all the population distributed across the Ghana map. But what is important here is I have a slicer. So when I click on the slicer, it focuses on the particular region that I have selected. So here I've selected Greater Accra region, and it shows me the total population in Greater Accra region. Now I have also put the list of religious affiliations here in a drop down. So here I can see the population of this particular religion. So example, if I choose Catholic, you realize that Catholics now represent 6% of the population in the Greater Accra region. However, if I switch up north, I'm able to see that Catholics are still dominant in the northern parts of the country. It is this kind of story that will be useful for your users, helping them interact and pick out key insights for decision making or action. So we like to build this. I'm going to walk you through the process, and the challenge is for you to build it or make it better. So join me and let's start the process shortly. So our journey begins with an understanding of the data set, the structure it came in, and how we can make it better for analysis. So here you realize there are some total columns here, which in analyzing we may not really need because we can calculate it from scratch. If you take the data, you realize that it's broken down into various dimensions put in different sections of the worksheet. So here I have the religious affiliations from the second row all the way to the 11th row. Then this same data comes in this time round described by male and female. So this is the gender part, the same data. And when you go down, you have it broken down by urban, rural, gender, female split. So that's how the data comes. And as a data analyst, it is important you understand the structure of your data set before you even take it to Power Query for transformation. In this shape, obviously, it's not going to help us. So the first thing we are going to do is to analyze the first part that talks about the religion, and the region. So these are the two dimensions or attributes we are going to focus on. So I'll stand anywhere in my cell and then go to data. So here we are taking the data set into Power Query to transform and shape it. So standing in any cell, I'll take the data from a table or range. There's currently a range. So when I click on it, it highlights a certain portion of the data set. As long as it goes beyond the area I need, it's fine. If you want to analyze this in bulk, you may have to take the whole worksheet. So I'll click OK. And then my Power Query opens. So here we are going to shape and transform the data to make it easier for us to analyze. ideally we should have each attribute in the same column. Okay, so what I mean is that we should have the religious affiliation in one column, we should have the regions in one column, and then the population in each region in another column. Okay, so let's use Power Query to shape this. Because we want to concentrate on the religious affiliations, we would like to keep the first 10 rows here. Okay, so in Power Query you can do that by selecting any column, and under Home you have the option to keep or remove rows. Okay, so in this option we are going to choose the keep top rows and then ask for the first 10 rows. So the number of rows is 10. I'll click OK. So I have something like this, right? So this gets rid of all the extra rows that I do not need. Of course, if you want to add gender or rural or urban, you probably want to use a different approach. You don't want to keep just the first 10 rows, but put in enough rows to give you the gender and then the rural dimension as well. Okay, so we now have this, and as I mentioned earlier, there are some aggregates that we can get rid of. We can calculate this from scratch. So number, percent are calculations, so I can highlight these, okay, and then remove these columns, right? As I'm doing this, you see that all these steps are recorded. It makes it easier for us to update when the data source changes. Okay, so these steps are here. Now, beyond the totals in the columns, I also have some totals in rows. So if you look at the shape of the data, you realize that there was an aggregation of all Christians. So Christians here representing Catholics, Protestants, Pentecostal, Charismatic, and other Christians. These four were aggregated here. Okay, and then the rest was also put in here. So these two are calculations. So I can also filter these out. That's how you get rid of rows in Power Query. So I'll stand here and then uncheck all locality and then the Christian calculation, and then I click OK. Okay, so this way I get my raw data set, which speaks to the 30 million entire population in Ghana. Okay, so we now have this. I can now rename this religion. Okay, and then I have now my region spread in 16 columns. Ideally, we should have one column that has the region type. So we are going to unpivot. Okay, so I will take this first column and then collapse all these 16 columns, okay, into two columns, one for the region and then the other for the population here. Okay, but before I do that, it is important we walk through the headers to be sure the spellings are correct. So here I can spot a misspelling of Easton, so I can change this to Easton. That is also recorded as a step here. Okay, that's what Power Query does. Then I can now come to my first column, right click, and unpivot other columns. Okay, so when I do this, I achieve the religion, all my regions in one attribute, and then my value column, which I'm going to use as the population column. So let me rename this and call this region, and then I'll call this population or adherents. Okay, so here I have religion, region, and population here. At this point, I can now create any analysis based on the region and religion type. So if your data type is correct, this is text, and I have values here. I can close and load. So in the close and load, you have an option to close and load to. So this gives you some options. You can load it directly as a table, straight to a pivot table report, as a pivot chart, or create a connection. So in this, I'm going to use the default table. I could have gone straight to a pivot table report, but I want to show you how the table looks like. Okay, so I'll click OK as a table, and this completes our extract, transform, and load process. So here we are, and at this point we are going to continue and create our pivot tables and our analysis for our dashboard and story. Okay, so now after bringing in a table, we are going to create the first visual, and this is the visual we want to create. This bar chart that has a focus on the religion that we have selected. This is driven by a pivot table. Okay, so we can insert a pivot table from this table directly. We could have done it from the Power Query, but for you to appreciate the steps. So I'm going to stand here in the pivot table and then insert a pivot table from this range. Okay, and I'm going to place it in the existing worksheet side by side, and I'll click OK. So here I'm going to build a very simple pivot table. Ideally, you should start with the value section, which is the population. So we have 30 million here, and I want to analyze this by religion. Okay, so this is going to break down the population by the various religious affiliations. Now at this point, I can sort the values out. Okay, so I also have the highest on top and the lowest below. What I want to achieve is to create a mirror of this pivot table that would focus on the religion I have selected. Okay, so before I do that, I want to put in here, let's say in K, a data validation. That is a drop-down list that has all the unique list of religious affiliations. So I'll go to data, and in the data tools group, I have data validation here. Okay, so the default is any value, and then the source is going to be on this list. Okay, then I'm going to click OK. So at this point, what I've achieved is I have all the types in one list. So now that this is in place, I'm going to mirror this table. So it's just a simple reference the first cell. Okay, shift move to the right with the arrow key, and then select the dimension of the original pivot table. Control R, Control D. I could have done this with a spilled array, but just to make sure every version can do this, you can use these steps to make it available, make the data set available. Okay, so I'm going to add an extra column called focus. So what we want to achieve here is if I select a particular religion, okay, I just want that religion's number in the focus area. The rest should come as NAs so that the chart is not able to plot the NAs. So we achieve this with a simple if formula. So if the value here, because I want to copy down, I'll lock this F4, if you like, at the row level, is equal to any of these that are here, then bring the population here. Okay, otherwise let's this cell read NA. Okay, so that is what we are going to do, and I'll copy this down, highlight, Control D. Right. So what I've achieved here is that if I select any of these types, okay, you see that I'm able to focus because I have only that number here, and this is what is giving us this visual. Okay, that makes it easy for us to switch and focus on what we have selected on. Right, so we'll build this and then you appreciate it. Okay, so at this point, let's attempt to build our first chart. Later, we'll create a dashboard and then we'll transport all the charts in there. So we've achieved this. I'll just highlight the whole of this area, okay, and insert a chart. So here I want to insert a bar chart. So this is the bar chart that I want. I'll click OK. Okay, and I have my bar chart here. Of course, we need to do a lot of work here to make it nice and straight to the point. So I'll take off my title, okay, and then take off my labels. Then the legend 2 can go off. Okay, now I want to order this such that the highest comes on top. Okay, I could rearrange the original data set, or I can select the labels here, press Ctrl 1. Okay, and in the axis options, I have categories in reverse order. So when I do categories in reverse order, I get this layout. I get it sorted in the way that I want. Okay, now let's take off the grid lines. Okay, and for you to understand what is happening, you see we have the sum of population in blue and then the focus area in red. And because there's only one number here, we have only the value for what we have selected showing in red. Okay, so we can highlight one of the series. So you can click one of the series, press Ctrl 1, and over here we can increase the series overlap to 100%. Okay, so this way we have the blue and red overlapping in the same area. Okay, and then to make the series a bit bigger, okay, you can reduce it to about 50 or 60 if you want. Okay, so we have something like this, right? Okay, so now that we're done with this chart, let's create our dashboard sheet. So I'm going to name this dashboard. Okay, and then I'll cut this chart and I'll place it here. Okay, so this will be on standby for us as we bring in the other elements. Okay, so once we have our dashboard in place, it will be good to rename all these sheets. So let me name this calculations. Okay, and then I'll name this data. Okay, so you can order it to make it easier for you. Okay, so we now have our dashboard, we have our calculations. This drop down list has to be transported. It helped us to appreciate what we were doing. So I'm going to cut and then take it to the dashboard, and in the scheme of things it is going to be the area we'll be selecting to control the chart. So we are going to place it somewhere in C4. Okay, so we have it here. Now because I transported it, the source has changed. So I'm going to change the source. The shortcut to go back to the data validation will be Alt DL. Okay, and the source now has to read including the worksheet name. Okay, so I'll come back to my calculations area and then reselect this and click OK. Okay, so this way I can now see that it is responding. Okay, when I select any part of the list. Okay, so we've achieved this first part. Next up, we want to bring in our Ghana map. Okay, and then put in our slicers. Okay, so now let's move to visualizing the Ghana map stage, and here I have in PowerPoint a black and white image, empty Ghana map. So we are going to use this as a background for our chart. Okay, so this is an image, so if you like you can copy it. So I'll right click and then copy this so that it stays in my clipboard. Okay, so that is how you go about this. Any image that you want to use, you copy. So I come here and I'm going to insert a chart. So in the chart group, I'm interested in this scatter chart, the bubble chart, the first one. Okay, so it initially gives me a blank chart, which is fine. So at this point, you can double click on the chart and you have the option to fill. You have the option to fill. So we are going to fill this with a picture, right? So when I fill with a picture, I can put in what I copied earlier, which is from my clipboard. Okay, so the map is going to serve as a background for my chart. Okay, so even though you're looking at this plain chart, this is what we are going to use to plot and put in the bubbles. Okay, so you can align it, you can resize it to give you the shape that you are interested in. Okay, so what we need to do is to find some coordinates to plot the various regions in Ghana. Okay, so to do that, let's go back to our calculations, and from this earlier pivot table, okay, I can copy it, Control C, and then come to the side and then paste this. Okay, so when it comes to creating pivot tables, it's easier to use the same cache. Makes it easier on your computer. Okay, so I have this version here. I'll go to pivot table analyze in the field list. Okay, instead of seeing this by religion, I want to see this by region. Okay, so I have something like this. Okay, so this is going to be my default analysis by region. Okay, and as we did earlier, we are going to copy the entire region excluding the grand total. So I'm going to copy this and then paste the values here. Okay, now the reason I'm doing this is that for each region I want to be able to locate where it is on the map, and we are using an SY scatter chart, so it means I will need an X coordinate and then a Y coordinate. Okay, so this is what I'm going to take to plot where each region is located on the map. Okay, so I'll cut this temporarily and then come to my dashboard, okay, and then place it somewhere here by the side. Later we'll take this. So for each region in Ghana, I want to use the XY to decide where this should be plotted. So we come to our map. Okay, there isn't any data feeding this map, so I will right click, okay, and then select data. Okay, so here I'm going to add a new set. So the series name can be any name, so let's say Ghana if you like, and it's asking me for X values. Okay, so my X values is going to be this range that has my X coordinates. Okay, and then my Y values, it's best always to start from a clean area, and then I have my Y values here. Okay, so I have given it my X and Y, and then I need to also provide for the bubble size. So the bubble size can be any other column here, so I'm going to clean this, okay, and then add this range to it. Remember, when you are selecting the bubble size range, it should be the same height, okay, excluding the header. Right, so I'll have this here. So just to go over, the series name is Ghana, my X values is in the X range, my Y values in the Y range, and my bubble size, which has the population here in the same area, and I'm going to click OK. Okay, so I'll finish this off. I'll label this size. Okay, so to make it easier on your eye, I'm going to add this Alt HBA. Okay, so our job is pretty simple, that for each, let's assume all the sizes are the same. So let's say I'm putting in 4,000. Where would each region be? Okay, so that is a basic thing we need to do here. Of course, before we can do this, we need to make sure the vertical and horizontal axes are the same. Okay, so it's currently reading some numbers, so you can double click on any of them, and we set the minimum bound from 0 to 10. Okay, so for the left side, it's going to be 0 to 10. So I have that on the vertical axis. While this pane is open, I can select the horizontal axis and also set this to from 0 to 10 as well. Okay, so this way I have equal dimension on the left and then on the bottom as well. Makes it very easy to plot your location. So our goal here is just to plot what we have. So we make sure that the map covers the entire area so that every region can be represented here. Okay, so after making sure the map falls within the chart area, we can now go through the process of plotting each region. This requires some patience and is all part of the visualization. So of course you need to know which region is which, and if you are not in Ghana, I'm going to add another field chart that will show you where each region is, and maybe on your worksheet you can also use this to plot. Okay, so I already copied this version, and this is what we are going to use as guide, okay, to plot where each region is. So if you look at the position of R4, we can plot it using, let's say, 1 on the x-axis and then 3 here. Okay, so let's try it. So 1 and 3. Okay, so this highlights R4. Okay, later we'll scale down the bubble size. Okay, but yours is just to locate where each region falls at the moment. So let's try Ashanti region. It's 4 and 3. Okay, so you go 4 and 3, and that's Ashanti region. So Bono is going to be 0 and 4. Is going to be Bono. You can also bring in some decimals if you just want to be more specific. So if I want to do 0.4, it moves it a bit to the right. Right, so that's 0.5. Okay, so Bono East is located in the middle, that is straight, 4 and 4.5. Okay, and then we have Central. So Central is going to be 4 and 1. So if you understand this concept, I'll probably speed up this part of the video, and then later, once you have your coordinates, we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so I've now completed my side. It may be different coordinates for you, but what is important is you get a concept. Okay, so I can now take off my axis labels. Okay, so I will delete this, and then I'll delete that as well. Okay, then the bubbles will probably be bigger than expected. So what you can do is you can double click, okay, and we can scale the bubble size down to, let's say, 40. Okay, so this way you have it nicely seated in each of the regions. Okay, you can make any adjustments for any region that has moved out of place. Okay, so this is going to now be linked to the coordinates that we have here. Okay, so I'm going to cut this again. We finished the job of helping us locate each region and then bring it back to calculations. So I'll bring it back here. Okay, and now at this point we are going to use the SY coordinates for each region as a lookup. Okay, so you copy just the first 3 columns, okay, and then you paste it here. Okay, so what we want to achieve is that if I want to see a particular region's location, use these XY coordinates as lookup, so that I will now feed the exact population from the original pivot table. Okay, so this is our pivot table, this is our staging table, this is what is feeding the map, and then this is going to be our lookup table. Okay, so let me name this or convert this into a table. So I'll click Ctrl T, okay, and maybe reset my table design to make it easier for you, and I'll name this lookup. Okay, so because we are going to put in a slicer that is going to be changing the height of this pivot table, okay, we want a dynamic XY coordinate lookup from here. Okay, so for R4 we'll look up the XY coordinates using a formula, and for all the rest of the regions. Okay, so here you can use index match, or we can use VLOOKUP, or we can use XLOOKUP. So I'm going to use index match, which is available in all the versions. So index, okay, my array is the result I'm looking for. This time around I'm looking for X, so I'll select the column lookup X as my result. I'll bring a comma, and then match. So what I'm matching is this particular region. Then I'll bring a comma, and then I have my region as my lookup array. Okay, then I'll bring a comma and then choose exact match. So I'll close for match and I'll close for index. So index my result, lookup x, match using the lookup value here, which is going to go down for each region, and then my lookup sits in the region part of my reference. Okay, then exact match for 0 for exact match. So if you follow, you realize that this is going to be the same formula for y. I'll just change x to y. So I'm going to copy this and then paste this down, copy this down. Okay, and then when I come here, equal to, and then I'll paste what I copied earlier and change this to y. So here it will give me the y coordinates. Okay, then I'll copy this down as well. So what I've achieved is a dynamic lookup for all the regions. I'm doing this so that when I bring in the slicers, this doesn't shift. Okay, now we put in dummy 4000s for the bubble size, right? So at this point, we are going to link it straight to our pivot table, but to make it the same height, I'm going to take off the grand total. So I'll come to pivot table, design, okay, and then take off the grand totals. So at this point, I'll select the first one and then link it directly with the source and then copy this down. Okay, then the size is going to be the same. I'll link it with the source. So anytime it shrinks, we'll get the same height moving up and down. Okay, so just to go over what we've achieved, this is the lookup table showing us the point where each region is. We have looked up those coordinates into our staging table and then linked up our region and size label from the original pivot table. At this point, you are done. It will respond to your dashboard. Okay, so when we come to our dashboard, you realize that we now have the various bubbles, some small, some big, showing the number of population in there. Okay, so I'll delete this and then we'll do the final touches in the next section. Okay, so now let's concentrate on our dashboard. There are 3 elements here. We have the map, we have the chart, and if you look at our final work, we have the slicer that allows us to control which region we are looking at, right? So to help us build the slicer, we'll go back to our calculations page. Okay, we didn't use a data model, so we'll have to step in one of the pivot tables. So I'm stepping in the one that has region and population. Okay, and I'll go to insert and insert a slicer while standing in the pivot table. So this is a slicer that is going to show us the type of regions that we have. By default, the slicer is connected to the pivot table you created it from. Okay, so if you right click the slicer and you come to report connections, you realize that of the 2 pivot tables, this is checked. So I'm going to add the second pivot table that controls our bar charts as well, and I'll click OK. So I'm going to cut the slicer, Control X, and then I come to our dashboard and I'll paste this. So our slicer is on the side, helping us see the location of the region that we have selected. So while this is going round, we can also take advantage to format the bubble. Okay, so you can clear the filter, right, and then select the bubble, Control 1. You can also double click to achieve the same thing. Okay, so here we can reduce the bubble size, which we've already scaled down to 40. Okay, and then we can change the color as well. So I'll come to the fill area, solid fill, okay, and we'll choose this blue fill here, which is going to be our blue throughout. Now while this is selected, we can close this and then hit the plus sign, and then we are going to add data labels. Okay, so our data labels is here, but we are going to use the arrow to give us more options. So I'll come to more options, and you realize that by default the Y value is selected. So you can add the bubble size which contains the population of each area, and then uncheck the Y value. Okay, so this is what we have. Then I'll fold the label options, okay, and then work on my numbers. So while the number field pops up, I'm going to change this from general to number, and then reduce this to 0 decimal places. Okay, so if it helps, you can come home, okay, and then bolden this, okay, and then change the font to Berlin Sun. Okay, take off the bold, and then you have something like this. So this is what is displayed to give you the population. But when you select 1, okay, you get a view of the population in that area. Okay, so now that we've achieved this, let's concentrate on our charts, our bar chart here. So with our bar chart, there are 2 things that we need to deal with: the color of the series, and then a dynamic label that will show us which religious affiliation we are focusing on. Okay, so to do that, you select the chart, and then you have format. Okay, you have format. Now under format, in the leftmost part, you have the option to select any component of your chart. This way you don't have to use a mouse to select any part to format. So the first area we are going to concentrate on is the series for sum of population. So when I select this, we want to help the user focus on what we have selected. So while this is selected, I'll press Ctrl 1, okay, and I'll use the fill bucket, change solid fill, and I'm going to change this to this shade of gray, the second one, with a 15% darker. Okay, and then I'll take off the borderline as well, so no line here. Right, so this would ensure that I'm having a different color for the religious affiliation that I have selected. Okay, so while the gray bars are selected, what we need to do is to put in the data labels. So while they are selected, I can hit the plus sign, okay, and then add the data labels to this. So I've added the data labels. I can select the data labels, press Ctrl 1, okay, and format this properly. Now note the steps we are going to use to format. Place it inside end, okay, and then come to the label options, come to number, and then change this from general to number, okay, and then reduce this to 0 decimal place. Right, so that's what we've achieved here. If you like, you can go to home, and then you can just change the font to Berlin Sun, which is what I prefer when I'm building dashboards. Okay, and you have something like this. So these same steps we are going to repeat for the focus series. Okay, so we are done with this one. You come in here and then you close this. So while this is selected, we can come to format, and then come and then select the focus series. So it selects this current wine series. Okay, I'll press Ctrl 1 and then use the fill series to change the color from wine to blue, okay, to help us focus on what we have selected. Okay, and then we take off the borderlines as well. Now, just as we did for the earlier series, we are going to add data labels to this, right? So when I add the data labels, you observe that I have some NAs here. We are going to deal with that shortly, but you can select the number that has shown for the series with the value. In this case, okay, we press Ctrl 1 and then we go through the same process we did earlier. We position this inside end so it moves in, okay, and then I'll come to my number, change this to a number with a comma, and then reduce this to 0, okay, and then come to home, change the same format. So Berlin Sun. Okay, and I have something like this. Now I want to invert the color of this black, so I'm going to invert it to white. Okay, so this way all the rest show black while the one I have selected is white. Okay, now let's deal with the NAs. So normally when you insert a chart and there are some NAs there, okay, what you can do is you can go to the chart design, go to select data, okay, and then this option hidden and empty cells, you can click on it and then check this box for show NA as an empty cell, and then you click OK and you click OK. So you get rid of that, and now you have this scenario where your focus series comes in with a white font blended in nicely, right? Okay, so we are almost there. You can now start positioning your objects. Now let's format our slicer. So our slicer is going to take the same color. So I'll come to our slicer tab, and then the default one is what I'm using. So I'll right click the default one and then duplicate. Okay, so I'm going to call this Finex, and I'll go through the process to format the slicer. So I have whole slicer, which is the whole thing. We are going to go into the format. The font is still going to remain black. Okay, we'll take off the border lines, so I'll choose none, and then the fill is also going to be no color. Okay, so that's what we are going to do. And then I have my header, so again I'll format, come to the font, okay, and it will remain black. The border line is going to remain blue, consistent with our blue color. Okay, and I'm going to choose this bottom border line. Okay, for the fill, we'll leave it at no color. The selected item with data shows the color of what you have selected. Okay, so for that one, we are going to change the format to this blue. Okay, and then the font, we'll change it to white, and then the border is going to be no border, and then I'll click OK. Okay, so let's see what we have. I'll click OK, come to the slicer, and now apply the first one. Okay, so this way I have my slicer nicely formatted to match what I have here. So to complete the formatting of the map, I'll select the grid lines and then delete it, the vertical and the horizontal grid lines. Okay, and then we'll come in to put in the labels for our caption. Okay, so it's a dynamic caption, so you can arrange your charts nicely here. So in the next section, we will learn how to create this dynamic caption that gives us the percentage of the religion we have selected in the region we have in the slicer. Okay, so we are going to round off with this dynamic label or caption. So if you look at our final work, we have this drop down list that allows us to choose any of the religious types here. Okay, and then we get a percentage. So example, if I choose Pentecostal charismatic, okay, it calculates 14% of the population in Northeast, right? So it's going to be dynamic, and this is what we want the user to focus on. So let's see how we did this. So this is already there, and I'm going to put in represents in this cell. Okay, so you can expand your column width to accommodate that, and this is where the dynamic calculation is going to be. So bottom line, it is the population of what I have selected here divided by the entire population. Okay, so to make it easier, I'll come to my calculations area and then do that work in here. So first I need the selected religion. Okay, so that is going to be equal to, then I'll come to my dashboard and then select this area. Okay, so based on what I have selected, I can now use this to find the percentage it represents. Okay, so remember I have the population of what I have selected in this first pivot table. Okay, so to calculate the percentage, I need to find the population. Okay, so first let me find a population, and this is going to be a lookup. Okay, so again, I'm going to use index. So equal to index. I need a result from this range of population numbers. Okay, bring a comma. I'll match this with what I'm searching with, which is this Pentecostal charismatic, the current selection. Bring a comma, and then my lookup array is where it sits in my reference point, and a comma for exact match. So I'll close match and I'll close index. So this is dynamic, so anytime I select a particular religion from the dashboard, this updates as well. Now let's find the percentage. So in terms of the percentage, it's simply going to be this divided by this grand total. Okay, then Control Shift percentage or 5 to format. If you like, you can use Alt H0, okay, or go to home, and then you can increase the decimal points from this point. Okay, so this is what is going to be feeding the dashboard based on what we have selected. So Pentecostal charismatic represents, then you come to this cell, you take your calculations, and then you take what you have in the cell and then you place it here. Okay, so we'll complete our sentence. Represents 29.51% of the population in the selected. So this is one takeaway for any action you require from the user. Okay, so again, let's focus on what matters. So we can paint this with a fill, change the font to white, and then for the number you can choose to bolden it. Okay, increase the font a bit, and then make this blue. Okay, and then for the rest we'll take off our grid lines and it will just fit in nicely. Okay, so let me just zoom out a bit so that we can have everything in view. The last thing you're going to do is to take off your grid lines, okay, to have that white canvas. So I'll take off my grid lines, and then I'll take off my border from here. So shape outline, no outline. So if you like, you can come and then change this font to Berlin Sun. Okay, take off the bolding here. Okay, and then expand this. So you have this nicely. Let's take off the format for the chart as well. So no outline. So everything looks very clean. Okay, so this is what we've achieved. So you see how it helps the user focus on really what matters. Okay, at this point you can decide to put in one title for what you've done. Okay, so analyzing Ghana's population by region and religion. Okay, I'll make this a bit bigger. Okay, if you like, I will just put in an underline, Alt HBO. Right, so this is what we've achieved, a very simple dashboard. But of course, the key takeaway is that for what you want the user to focus on, we've given it a consistent blue theme. Okay, dimmed all the other ones, and we are able to take this story away. Whatever religion that you are interested in, you can select it from here, and straight away you are able to see, okay, the percentage in that population. Okay, and then you can also use the slicer to also focus on the area of interest as well. So it'd be good if you could build this, but I'll make the data set available. If it helps, you can challenge yourself by querying the entire data set. You know, in my case, I just used the portion that had religion and region. Okay, if you like, you can query the part that has the gender attributes as well, and then see if you can use Power Query to transform this to also tell a better story than what you are looking at. Thanks for watching, and looking forward to seeing your dashboard and your story as well. Thank you.